Welcome back to Capital Controls, where Kristin-Smith and I are covering the intersection of crypto and politics. Right now, we're joined by the co-chair of the Congressional Blockchain-Caucus from the great state of Minnesota, Representative Tom-Emmer. Welcome, Congressman.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Although I wish I were there in person.
Likewise. So whereabouts are you dialing in from? I'm actually sheltered in place in Eden Prairie, just west of Minneapolis. So maybe we're just down the road from each other. But
Well, I'm in my town of Delano, where people from Eden Prairie usually board their horses. So we'll see you out here when you come visit your animals.
All right, I'll take you up on that offer sometime. So it's been a year since we had you at Physical Consensus last year in New York, and the world's obviously changed a bit since then. We've had the announcement of Libra last June. We've had the Chinese really pushing aggressively CBDC. We've had this current economic calamity. Just tell us a bit about how your thinking has really changed on cryptocurrencies and digital assets these last 12 months.
Well, mine has not changed. It's only become more focused. You probably know that I became the ranking member of the FinTech Task Force on the House Financial Services Committee, but I had the interest long before that. Look, I think we're in a phase right now. This crisis has renewed our interest. Plus, you have a big event that's going to happen in just a few hours. I love the timer, right? The Bitcoin halving in 3 hours plus today. Scarcity has a way of driving value, and it's something that maybe our federal government needs to refocus on. But as far as cryptocurrency over the past 12 months, the evolution has been primarily in Congress, has been with members starting to raise their awareness as to what this is. As we discussed a year ago, the problem is a lot of members of Congress, because they are not informed, because they come from a generation that didn't grow up with computers, let alone cryptocurrency or technology, groundbreaking technology like blockchain. They didn't know what it was. And so it's very easy to distract them with stories about Silk Road and other problems. And I think we've largely started to overcome that in the last 12 months. And then again, this, I think following the initial coin offering craze of 2017, this truly was the year that people started to temper the hype. Major industries and companies looked at these opportunities in cryptocurrency, in the space itself. And you just heard from Brian Brooks, who I think is a great appointment. Bring someone from the industry that's familiar with the industry into government, into that bureaucracy that's been slow to move. And when he starts talking in terms, quote, there's synergy, he believes, between the banks and crypto, that's a good sign for the future.
So, Congressman, what is in the works with blockchain legislation this year? I mean, obviously, this is a very strange time in Washington. I'm probably the only one in Washington right now. There is an election coming up, but we have seen some legislation moved in response to the crisis. Is there any hope of moving pro-crypto bills as we look to reboot the economy post-pandemic?
It's a great question, and it's one that, believe me, when you have a crisis, that things are happening very quickly. People who are skilled at the legislative process side of things can find ways to incorporate language that, on its face, may not strike you as anything groundbreaking, but when it's implemented after the fact, definitely can have a very significant impact. Has that happened? Not yet. I think, as I've already told you, I'm the ranking member of the FinTech Task Force. We do have some bipartisan legislation, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which I think Brian alluded to licenses in his presentation earlier too, when he said we got to look at what crypto is. I mean, if it's global, then perhaps it makes a lot of sense to have one standard for licensing, and that's what this bill is all about. It would ensure that blockchain service providers wouldn't have to register as a regulated money transmitter because they don't, in fact, take control of anyone else's funds. This would include wallet providers, miners, those that provide enhanced security for individuals that hold crypto. I would say the Blockchain-Caucus also supports the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act. This was introduced by Susan Delbaney out of Washington, this Congress, but was originally the idea of my friend David Schweikert from Arizona in the last Congress. It would exclude from gross income for income tax purposes up to $200 of gain from the disposition of virtual currency in a personal transaction. This is the same exemption that all Americans currently have when traveling abroad and exchanging their dollars for other currencies. And by the way, that's the kind of bill that I just gave you, the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act, that could find its way into some of the legislation that we're having to create to deal with a crisis.
Oh, interesting. So thank you for that update, Congressman. That's great. And on to much more important matters. So we have the Bitcoin halving coming up later today, as you mentioned. So we need you to tell us what's going to happen to the price of Bitcoin after the halving.
Well, I'm afraid that's probably investment advice, which in light of certain members of Congress and their handling of investments recently, I don't know that I want to wade into that water. I would say that historically, whenever this has happened, you see price increase in the short term. Again, it's about scarcity, right? You're unlike the U.S. dollar once it was taken off of the gold standard, and now you can print more dollars because it's not pegged to anything. This is what I believe makes Bitcoin very valuable, is that the concept of scarcity. You're getting less and less of an opportunity, which in theory would suggest that it increases the price or the value. So take that for what it's worth. That and a nickel will give you a nickel.
Excellent. And then also one other very important question here, but what do you think about the money printer goes burr meme?
So I love that. Landon showed that to me. Landon Zinda, who, as many on the call probably know, handles this with me in Washington, D.C. And he gave me this YouTube. I said, looks pretty accurate to me. I smiled, but at the same time, it's only because we have to smile during these times. We're going to have to figure out
extra R's to your Twitter handle, like in solidarity. It's the trend is you add a bunch of R's,
We might have to consider doing that. We have to get across the bridge in this crisis. I get this isn't something that anybody predicted or created. This is a natural disaster, a natural phenomena. This is when your government's supposed to be there to protect its citizens and its property and their property. But in this case, we did $1.7 trillion in a little more than a month. Frankly, for people like me, it was the ultimate Hobson's choice. You could either say no, in which case, based on the way the financial system is built today, you could risk the whole thing imploding and crashing and having a deeper recession than we even knew in the 30s. Or you take a chance, you try to get across the bridge, and then we got to rethink the way our financial world works. We got to get back to creating wealth instead of creating debt. And I think that's the future for cryptocurrency. I think the future is bright because of that.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for all of your efforts supporting crypto technology on Capitol Hill. You've been a fantastic champion on behalf of the community, and we really appreciate it. Coming up shortly, we have in our next segment, the mastermind behind DC FinTech Week, Chris Brummer.
And before we get to that, quick reminder that CoinDesk, in partnership with Ethereal, Gitcoin, and the Giving Block, is raising funds to help the millions